Pronto? Eccoci qua. Buonasera. Con grande piacere che noi di Wired ospitiamo a partire da adesso praticamente una conferenza nella conferenza. Infatti gli ospiti che ci sono qui sono parte della Mobile Only Conference, che ovviamente, come dice il nome, è una serie di appuntamenti di oggi e domani in questo Dome dedicata all'economia mobile only. Come sappiamo, il mobile è sempre più importante, ormai col telefonino facciamo tantissime cose, anche a parte navigare in internet, la più banale, molte cose legate all'economia, cioè scambiamo informazioni del denaro, accediamo al nostro conto corrente e tutta una serie di ospiti internazionali e nazionali, esperti della materia, ci mostreranno tutti gli sviluppi di questa economia mobile only. La Mobile Only Conference è organizzata da Vito Margiotta e Benedetta Arese Lucini e oggi abbiamo i primi relatori che io farei introdurre al moderatore, che è Rodolfo Guarino di The Carlyle Group.
Grazie mille. I'll switch to English for the rest of the conference, just to get going. Thank you very much to the Wired Next Fest for hosting us for this first edition of the Mobile Only Conference. My name is Rodolfo Guarino, and I work in private equity, which is somewhat investing in more mature companies rather than new ventures, as this of our panel here. But I have a great interest in venture capital and investing in company and new ventures in general, and I'm very excited to have our panel today. I would therefore keep it really simple and pass on, to start introducing our panel. I would ask you guys to give a brief interview about yourself, what you do and what your company does, and give us a sense of what mobile only is for you, because for us it's really the mobile being more and more the framework for hosting customer experiences, but more than that is about the 1 billion new people who are coming online by 2020, all in emerging markets such as Africa, Latin America, and Asia. So please, I'll pass it on to you, Hanan.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Hanan Brand. I'm a partner at a US-based fund called Cornerstone Venture Partners. Previously, I worked in two of Israel's biggest funds, in Ofer High Tech and Jerusalem Venture Partners, JVP. I'm also on the steering committee of Mass Challenge. It's an accelerator with offices in Boston, in London, in Jerusalem, and New Mexico. So around a year ago, we founded a new fund, me and my partner Michael, who's here in the audience, which is focusing on a few areas where we believe the world is going to change by 2020. Just mentioning a few: financial technologies, IoT, big data, which I'm sure you all know about, but also the mobile-only economies, which are emerging very fast. So for me, the mobile-only economy, I don't know how many people here in the audience read the book by Thomas Friedman from New York Times, The World is Flat. He wrote it 10 years ago and talked about how the globalization is actually connecting between people and making everything very close. But it really didn't change until recently, because the internet penetration wasn't as fast as planned. Today, only 2% of people have only landlines in these areas. But what is happening in the last couple of years, where the mobile penetration is going crazy in these countries, and some of them more than 90% of people have mobile phones, like in the US, like in Italy, the economy is completely changing, where these million people who are joining are connected to the whole world, and a lot of opportunities are coming out of this new trend.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Penkala. I'm working for Mountain Partners as a global venture developer and investment director. Mountain Partners is a global venture builder. We're focusing on emerging markets and try to build companies from scratch in those emerging markets. And we do act as a classic VC in early stage, seed stage, and try to guide young entrepreneurs with not only money, but knowledge and the infrastructure and everything they need, especially in emerging markets, through the funnel of creating a company. So what I do on a daily basis, pretty much two things. One is the classic international investment management. I focus on Africa and Latin America at the moment. And the second part is internationalization of companies. So when we do identify a company in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, or Africa, where we have hubs and company builders, We try to help them throughout our infrastructure with money, with smart money, with everything which they need to actually replicate the idea, the business model in new markets on a daily basis. So that's what I do for a living.
Hi everyone, my name is Alisee. I'm currently based in Nigeria, and with SeedStars, the organization that we founded 3 years ago, we build and invest in early stage companies in emerging markets. So we started to build a network through the competition SeedStars World, which is now present in 65 countries. And from there, we're building 13 hubs globally to invest and build companies and extend our portfolio.
Great, thank you very much for the introduction. I wanna start with this question: how and if the introduction and the evolution of the mobile-only phenomenon has changed the way you look at a company, you evaluate. You all have different experiences, and you look at companies from a different perspective. You spoke about your experiences and your experience about acceleration. So, the question for you, maybe Mark, I'll start with you. Has it changed, the concept of mobile-only and mobile-only environment in many economies? Has it changed the way, recently, the way you look at companies when you are evaluating them in order to accelerate them or not? And how, of course?
Absolutely. Especially in emerging markets, most of the companies we actually work with or we see in our deal flow start with an app. Why? It's super fast, it's cheap, it's simple, and it's an easy way to actually understand the market, to penetrate the market, get like first feet on the ground in the market. So usually what we see is that's how they enter it, but within the next or second step, they always try to find a desktop version. How can they monetize easier on a desktop way? What's very interesting is it's super hard to monetize an app in an emerging market or like just a mobile version. But it's not easy as well to do it with a desktop version because people don't use desktop, they use mobile. So they kind of have to find the middle way to actually connect mobile, desktop, and any kind of offline version to find a monetization model. So as I said, to summarize it, they start with a mobile app, go to desktop, and then they go back to mobile or offline monetization in those markets. That's what we see at least.
And Alisee, how does Seed work? How do you look at this?
So we started with the focus emerging markets. So by default, we've always looked at deal flow related to mobile because, as we said, all the new consumers in these markets, we can access them through mobile phone. When we look at business models, it's always interesting to see how much they consider feature phones because still the majority, especially in Africa, are on feature phones. It means you have to be prepared to move to smartphones in the coming years because it's happening. It's just a question of 3-4 years where everyone will be on smartphone. But for that, you actually have to access and understand the consumer. So we recently invested in a company in South Africa, Giraffe, which is a HR agency, and actually allows anyone that is looking for a job to build his CV on a mobile phone simply through SMS. So, and if you look at Africans on average, how do they use their mobile phone the most? It's still texting. So it's still SMS, the primary use. So from that, I think it's very interesting to see the strategy, for example.
And Hanan?
I think that this word, mobile only, is actually a very, very new kind of term. What we hear a lot in the conferences in the States is mobile first, where we believe that there's more and more people from the Y generation where their first connection to the internet is through a mobile phone. But the idea there is still a desktop that you have. I think it's very important to see that in these areas we're talking about, desktop is not an option at all. And most of the tech companies we see, including could be Foursquare, could be Kayak or Facebook or additional Airbnb, see the mobile as a second screen. You create through the desktop and you consume through the mobile phone. And I think what is still missing, and we're seeing more and more companies going to this market, is mobile to create through the mobile, not only to consume through the mobile. And that, I think, is still a barrier for these people in these economies.
So, but let's say that you're evaluating a company, okay, and it's operating and its business model, it's aimed at one of these geographies, as one of these mobile-only environment. What are the top 3, top 5? Give us a brief list of the elements that really gets you to the finish line in terms of investment decision, or maybe the things that you really don't want to see when speaking with an entrepreneur.
So the first tip I think I have is think global but act local. We see a lot of companies who are coming into these markets and trying to use the same Western mechanism or American mechanism in markets where the mechanisms are completely different without really understanding the local banking system, financial institutions, cultures. And I would say, if you want to go into these markets, learn about it, understand what works and what does not work. In addition, there's an interesting fund that I really like their idea. Dave McClure from 500 Startups. It seems that you guys are doing things that are very different. Is a lot of funds in the Silicon Valley say, you're in India, you're in South America. If you want to succeed, come to us, come to the Silicon Valley, and you can succeed here. And what 500 Startups are saying, we need to shift that. We need to invest in entrepreneurs in their areas. And they created funds that invest in Vietnam and in Africa and different countries, saying we want local entrepreneurs who know their own markets. So I would say don't try to Americanize the company and copy other activities.
What about you guys? Is there any, must-haves, must-not-haves that you would?
To be very honest, the first thing we always look at is the team. So A team with a B idea over B team with an A idea. That's the premise. The second thing we look at, like scalability. So independent of if you have a multi-device approach with a mobile and a desktop approach and whatsoever, the idea has to be scalable. So we are very, very number driven. We love KPIs. So we look at customer lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. So only if I can scale those numbers, it's sexy and attractive for us. And the third thing...
And sorry if I interrupt,
sure.
But it's an interesting feature because you mentioned scalability. We're talking about geographies that are not the same and that have a very, let's say, strong local content and characteristics. So how do you match, the scalability with these different environments, right?
It's a very, very good question. That's the question we're asking ourselves every time we take a company international. I can tell you the answer. It's experience. Like when we are in the markets and we are active in the market on the ground with people. For example, we have a hub in Indonesia with 500 people. We're active there for the last, I think, 4 to 5 years. And we built like more than 10 companies there. So you know at a certain point, how much does it cost you to actually acquire a customer in sector e-commerce or mobile or whatsoever. So by comparing models and actually having a comparable on the ground, we can try to extrapolate how much is it going to cost us to take a company from Colombia International to Indonesia. So it's a gut feeling we have, it's the experience we have, and of course, we try to prove customer acquisition costs compared to the customer lifetime value in those markets. And throughout the numbers we have in other markets, we can actually compare and define the right market to take the company from that.
So you would say it's more art than science. Would you say that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's something we learned over time. It took us, we're doing this for 15 years, and that's how much it took us to actually identify the right markets and try to pick the right models, internationalize them. And I can proudly say we didn't lose one company in 2 years, and we have a portfolio of 100 companies. So maybe you're super lucky, could be, but I think it's just like picking the right companies, picking the right people, and pivoting those companies and then internationalizing. And that's the third part, besides the team and the scalability, how internationalizable is a company? As we have a global infrastructure in so many emerging markets, for us it would be stupid and a waste of time and resources if we wouldn't use those hubs to replicate companies. I mean, if you look at the markets, you're facing 3 risks. A market risk, executional risk, and a business model risk. Only if you minimize those 3 risks, you can be successful with the business model. So it's very important to have people on the ground, know the market, put the right people on there, and then internationalize to actually maximize where we see the return of investment.
Yes, sir.
So same answer as him. That's what I think. But just to give some particularities of the market, for example, when you think mobile in emerging markets, you think Android. Like people that are coming with iOS, I'm like, okay, that's not at all the same penetration as in Europe or the US. So for example, in Nigeria, mostly it's Chinese Dubai brands that are overtaken, and all of them are on Android. Secondly, what I mentioned before, again, don't underestimate the potential market of those still on feature phones that you can acquire quite cheaply and then help them to, when they're on smartphone, to stay on your application service solution. And then the toughest problem for us is understanding how do they want to scale and monetize, knowing that data is still so very expensive in these markets. In many of these regions, to have a subscription model in Nigeria, for example, it's more or less equivalent to 1 year yearly income for an average salary. So it gets really tough to understand, and then there are great partnerships you can do with big tech companies. Maybe Facebook recently did a collaboration with Airtel, which is one of the big telcos in Nigeria, so you can access a certain amount of services for free. There are different solutions that you can bring your product directly offline so that they can access it. And that for us is also kind of the more environmental issues that we have when thinking emerging markets.
You briefly mentioned one thing that I think is relevant, which is monetization. Okay, to me, and I don't have a strong technology background, but when I look at the investment opportunity in mobile-only environments, one of the biggest issues that I see is two things actually: monetization and mobile payments, which are not necessarily correlated with each other, but they are to a certain extent, right? And I think about countries such as Nigeria, where you do have experience, and you tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I see really the monetization from these kind of companies as an issue, as an unclimbed mountain to a certain extent. Do you agree with me? You don't? Do you think that there are viable methods of monetizing, of actually, selling your product mobile only, based on your experience?
Yes, because again, the only access to the consumer will be through mobile in time. So, and it's true, it's very tough to convert them and to make money. But it's the only way you access them. We invested in a payment solution in Nigeria, Simple Pay, 2 years ago, and the toughest part, I think, is more the environment, so what it means to actually certify the product in the region. Nigeria, we know what it represents internationally. I mean, I recently did a post about the company, and straight away I had people from Europe telling me, wow, this is a fraud, have you realized? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in Nigeria, I know the company, but that's really the mentality people have of these companies. So it's more an issue of infrastructure, but that's going to come, and this is where technology becomes the game changer, because you don't need to wait. You're not going through the same pathway as Europe or the US is going. So in the contrary, I think this is going to be most probably one of the most viable business models to scale. And in any industry, when I was talking earlier about HR, but maybe in terms of education, maybe in terms of health, payment, loan systems, credit scoring will be majority through a profile of understanding their mobile activity, etc.
I see. And do you see the emergence of a standard with regards to mobile payments, or is it really still waiting for the global standard for enabling monetization and mobile payment specifically? Standard solution, I mean, you mentioned. So imagining at an Africa level or something like that, very difficult, because every market is completely different. Everyone talks about the success of M-Pesa in Kenya, for example, which now today over 40% of the national GDP passes through M-Pesa. So it's unbelievable. It's completely mainstream. The problem that this was a telco, Safaricom, that was able to have the power of a bank, but for example in Nigeria, telcos do not have at all the same regulations and can't have the same system, for example. And they have a complete monopoly, more or less, of the market. Very different in Nigeria or other places, and that's why also when Safaricom tried to expand M-Pesa, it's been more difficult to go in new markets. What's your take, gentlemen, on monetization, mobile payments?
Yeah, so if you talked about M-Pesa, how many people here in the audience transferred or received money through their mobile phones in the last year?
Well,
so okay, it's quite. We're in the Wired conference, but in Kenya in 2014, more than 60% of the population received money or paid through their phone. And I think one of the barriers of the mobile monetization world was people were not really counting on their phone as a place where you pay. You pay through the computer. You don't pay through the mobile. In these countries, the mobile becomes your wallet. It's not only your wallet. It's your wallet. It's your television. It's your e-commerce platform. It could be how you pay in the bus. It could be many different things. And I believe in these countries after M-Pesa, and I know they're starting now in Tanzania as well and other countries, the phone will be your identity. And when it's your identity, you count on it. what I think is still needed is more security. I don't see a lot of security of payment systems really targeting the markets there, and fraud is, of course, still a big problem. But more and more companies are targeting these areas, and I believe in 2-3 years, all of these monetization issues will be solved, and companies who are already in the market will benefit from that.
I see. Mark.
I would just like to add one thing, which I think is very interesting. When you look, for example, at American Express, from all the money they're processing around the world, less than 0.00 something percent is fraud. When we look in the markets where we're active, especially in Latin America or in Africa, the fraud you're having through processing mobile payments or cashless payments in general, if they're over desktop or mobile, doesn't matter, might range between 3 and 10%. So this might ruin a whole business model just because you have so many fraud cases. For example, we have this one company and they do mobile ticketing for bus transfers in Chile. And they do this in Chile and Argentina, Peru, and those are the countries there that generate probably 85% of their revenues. And they have cases where they lose in a month 10% of their revenues due to fraud. PayPal's blocking the money, or money couldn't be processed. The payment markets are highly diversified. It's not like in Europe or a sophisticated market that you have like 3 or 4 players covering 80 or 90% of all payments processed through online. So this is one of the biggest challenge, gaining trust in those markets for the users and of course for the companies to allow them to process the money. Because what is happening if you have so many fraud cases, payment is becoming more expensive, not to the fraud, because there's another part, the companies who process, they charge you for it. They will say, okay, the payment processing fee is not 1%, it's 4%. Because we have so many fraud cases, somebody has to take care of it. This is reflected in our OPEX. So this is very difficult. And this is one of the biggest challenges we're seeing at the moment, especially in Latin America.
And have you been able to solve
no,
if I still coping with that?
I wouldn't be sitting here if I wouldn't solve that. No.
Another thing that I felt, I don't know if you guys felt, in many of these markets, e-commerce was the big major hit of educating the consumers, etc. And many, to acquire faster consumers, provided the service pay on delivery. So you order, and then once the person delivers the product to your house, then only do you pay, which is a very complicated business model, and cash flow-wise, logistics, it's a nightmare. So I think also it was also a mistake that now companies today live the pain, which is it accelerated adoption of new consumers, but I think it also now has quite slowed down the acquisition of consumers to pay online. Because it's so much easier, you just wait, you can wait for your product to come, you pay on cash. So people also have that kind of in mind when converting or not to payment online.
Okay, but relating to what you said, Mark, so you also believe that is an ongoing process of adjusting, right? A solution that still hasn't been found, right?
I think it's not only payment. You have to consider or see the whole value chain. It's logistics, it's the payment, it's the trust of the consumer.
Sure.
For example, take Colombia. When you do a breakdown of any kind of good which is delivered in Colombia, sold online, roughly 18% of the cost of the good will be logistics, because they have the worst logistics ever. So people are not willing to pay online, transfer the money to somebody, because they don't know if the product will ever arrive. Maybe it takes 6 weeks, maybe it's not going to arrive ever. So people, that's what Alisee exactly said, it's like, nah, I pay once they deliver. So even if I could pay online, which would be the easiest, most fast way, I pay them once I have the product, because the trustworthiness, even of big players, is not as high yet. So there's a value chain problem. It's not only payment, it's just like all the steps until you actually receive the good.
I see. And it's funny that you mentioned, that monetization is not the only issue that you need to deal with, because I really think it gives us a sense of the difficulties that you face. These are growing markets, a secular trend that is there for sure. Still, between graphs that are always going up and execution, the bridge is significant. So I guess the question for you, coming from an international background, right? You're not from Chile. You probably started doing business with experiences. How do you think? How do you add value because of this, local knowledge, because of the difficulties that each market different versus the other ones? How an international player such as you really add value locally, because I understand it's easy for a local company when it partners with you to scale. I get that. But how do you add value locally? Is it about only selecting the right guys that know the market, or there's more than that?
Two things. When you look at the whole world, 80% of the problem a founder will face in an early stage are exactly the same. So by minimizing those classic problems, trying to find the product market fit, trying to find the right business model or like revenue model in general, trying to not do these classic mistakes you usually do as a founder. You have so much love for the product, so much detail love, and what you forget is to make money. So by minimizing those risks, you have 80% less risk. The local risk we're facing is the local environment, local circumstances, so that will be the additional 20 or the residual 20%, which you have to minimize. How do we minimize those? When we go into new markets, especially in the emerging markets, we never go alone. That's the most important rule for us. So we always try to find local people who run our hubs, who run our offices, who have a local network, who have access, and who actually built companies before. So if I just put a smart banker there or a consultant who knows how to do things efficiently, it's not going to work. You need to have somebody who has A, skin in the game, B, who already went through the pain. Because how authentic am I if I try to tell a young entrepreneur, hey, this is how you have to do it? And he's like, have you ever built a company? And you say, no, but I've seen 100. And he's going to say, okay, thank you. So it's very important that people meet on ice height, people have a local network and the experience on how to build those companies, and they had to went through the pain. And that's how we think that we can minimize the majority of the risk which you're facing when you either internationalize or set up a company in emerging markets. Okay.
Hanan, how do you help your portfolio companies when they operate in Kenya, when they operate in Nigeria?
Okay, so I'll answer a slight different question. We're different than you guys. We're not only focused on mobile-only economies. We're not focused only on developing markets. But what we see in companies that are coming to us with many very, very interesting solutions could be, from e-commerce, payments, cybersecurity, big data. The way they see it, they start in Israel or they start in Europe, and the next stage is moving directly to the two big markets in the East Coast and the West Coast in the States. And it makes a lot of sense. The big companies are there, the money is there. But what I think we are telling our companies is think a second before you go to the usual suspect and think about additional markets who could maybe use your product. Not necessarily in Africa or South America, but there's a lot of markets that need new solutions. And instead of competing in the same areas where everyone is, it's maybe better to try and start to try in new areas. What I think we'll see in the next couple of years, how many tech companies are opening offices in Nairobi or in Lagos or in these countries who are going to be the next capitals of the world? Not a lot, but I believe this is going to change. And once the tech companies are going into these markets, they will want solutions, and companies who are already there will really benefit from that. So what we're telling our companies, if your market is in the States, go to the States. But think before you do it. There's a lot of other opportunities there around the globe.
Okay, so it's a lot about prioritization and selecting your go-to-market, right? Priorities. Alisee, what's your take
We
there?
really started in building a network, so I think that's really the game changer, and it helps you enter faster, have the right visibility and the right approach and understanding the rules of the game. So SeedStar's World, the competition was our vehicle to build this network so we could access the right accelerators, incubator, co-working, investors, government agency, everyone that kind of puts together the local ecosystem. And from there, now we're 3 years in with the competition. We're verticalizing our efforts with these hubs that we want to build in 13 cities. And we don't go alone. So we always have local investors that are ready to put skin in the game and that can also open up their networks. And from there, we know it takes time, and we're ready to take the time to build the local talent and build the infrastructure needed.
I think we have some 10 minutes left. So before turning to the audience for some questions, I wanted to ask you guys, given these markets are really fascinating and the characteristics they have are absolutely unique. Why don't you give us a short pitch of one company that you think it's interesting, and that you have recently seen operating in a mobile-only environment that you think have as a spike from this perspective? Is there one?
Find fun ones so that you guys see the difference of the markets. We saw one very interesting in India where it's very simple. But the problem is many times you don't have the connection, you don't even have enough data to download music, a video, etc. So what they do is you send a text message with the song that you want. So I want to be listening to this song. And then they will call you so that you can listen to the song. So that typically is something that works for kind of a mass population in this region. And you have the same for videos. So instead of downloading a video, which many times, according to data, can cost more, you pay for the video at a fixed price. So kind of a more subscription model when it comes to sharing and looking at videos. So these are cool models that are very specific to these markets and the conditions.
Mark, do you have any story for us?
We have one company which I personally very like a lot is Nubliar. And Nubliar is the Netflix for magazines. Newspapers, magazines.
Okay.
We launched it like 1.5 years ago in Mexico. It's going through the roof and just got acquired. Like within 1.5 years from zero to having, I think, more than 100,000 subscribers, and just got acquired from a big company in Mexico. And they will take it international and probably generate the money they paid for it within 2 months, just through the leverage.
And is this model scalable? You know, coming back to
absolutely.
Yeah?
You know the unit economics. You know exactly the breakdown of how much it's going to cost you to pay the license, to have the magazines, to have the newspapers on board, and so on. And you can go to the new markets if you have access to media houses and have comparables. You definitely have to just access them, structure the deal, and actually you exactly know how much money you're going to make. Okay. Because once you know how much it's going to cost you to acquire a customer mobile, you have all the numbers you need.
Yeah, so around 7-8 months ago, we invested in a company called Snap Builder that coincidentally, the founders are here in the audience, Asaf and Vito. What Snap is doing is a platform that is focused on this mobile-only economy. On many levels, mostly for businesses, you can create through the mobile phone. It's the first platform where you can create from the mobile phone. It's a very simple developer. You don't need any technical background to create applications, to create website, your first online presence for small businesses in these economies. Second of all, acquire customers from your specific areas, but also from customers from, could be around, from the different other side of the world, where $5 could be a very big change for these businesses. And the third thing is to integrate with technologies, third-party applications that can help the e-commerce really succeed. So today they have, I think, more than 130,000 downloads and users, 4,000 businesses created based on the system. We're, of course, very proud of them. And we see it as part of this trend.
And I understand the ambition here is really to enable, people in mobile-only markets.
Yeah, all of the different
content.
creation platforms like Wix and Como and in Squarespace. What they say is you can create from your PC, and then people can consume from their phone. What the company is saying, everything today should be from your PC, from your mobile phone. Sorry, including your CRM, ERP, payment systems. They're the first, or one of the first, I think, in this trend, but I believe there will be many more companies going into this.
Understand. We have something more than 5 minutes. If anyone has some questions for our panel, would be very happy to take it. Please. I'll repeat it for you. You just do it. So I guess I think everyone heard the question, but the question is more about in mobile-only economies, there are huge number of people, huge number of subscribers. What are the verticals? What are the end markets that you think are sexier to invest in?
I can start. It's a country-by-country answer. I couldn't tell you that there's a global emerging market thing where you say this sector is going to be super attractive. What we're seeing at the moment is definitely that fintech is becoming like super hyped, even emerging markets. It's just picking up in Germany. It's funny, but when I looked into Latin America, they're more advanced than we are. We asked the question about how many people paid with their phone. I mean, if I would ask the same question somewhere in Latin America, probably half the room would say, yes, I did. So if there is another sector besides fintech, I don't know, that's what we see a lot lately. So what we always say at Mountain Partners is one thing. It's like when we go into a market, some kind of like you have a time machine. You have to identify exactly where you are in this market, usually like 5 years behind, 10 years behind, 15 years behind. So you have the classifieds, and all of a sudden you have the verticals. And if you find the right moment, you exactly know what's the next thing you have to build there, because you can see from developed market what has been built there, such as an eBay, such as a comparison platform, such as whatsoever. And you have to be very sensible about finding that moment to define what the next thing is there, which is necessary, because all the countries develop the same way when it comes to those things. And that's what we see.
A curiosity, Mark. Is this, let's say, curve of, sophistication, let's call it this way, of markets, correlated with economic growth, of GDP growth, or not necessarily? Is that the case?
I wouldn't say it's correlating with a GDP or anything. It's correlating with the behavior of the people and the demand of what people have. Of course, if they have more money, they will try to get other things. But when you look into the lending space, even if you have microloans, but if you have 10 million microloans, the amount of loans given out might be the same as at a developed market when the people take bigger loans. So you have to actually go into a lot of detail to identify those things. I wouldn't say that there's a correlation, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
I oppose the question. I think it's the same as asking, what should you invest in Italy, right? In the end, it's the same people who are just moving very, very, very quick with the GDP growth and additional infrastructure from where the world was 50 years ago or 100 into the current world, and they need everything. Once infrastructure problems and payments issues are solved, and regulation and war and some other issues, it will progress very fast. And they will need IoT, they will need big data, they will need mobile, they will need green technologies, they will need cybersecurity issues. Businesses will need CRM systems. It's basically everything we see today in the Western world, I believe these developing economies need. My answer is everything, basically.
Trends, fintech, very, very sexy right now. We have a lot of gaming also, which is quite big. All these SaaS models to help SMEs, maybe in accounting, payroll, etc., is happening, and they're great business models. Clean tech, more and more, because it's cheap, it's low tech. When you think emerging markets, you don't think very like a lot of patents and extremely sophisticated technology or teams. Sometimes it's in the simplest things, but it works, and it can be like these microgrid solutions, but everything is connected to the mobile. So you have that with agri-tech, etc. Trying to think of something else. Go ahead while I think.
What I think is still missing is the smart cities.
Yeah,
I think this could be very interesting. There's cities, you can take a few examples, who are growing from 1 million, 2 million people to 10 million in just 10 or 20 years. You can't compare it to anything maybe in a humankind in history. And we need these areas, even if they look very poor or rural, they need smart city technologies, including, of course, video surveillance, security, connectivity, a lot of different things, and I believe companies that will be there will benefit from that as well.
And super quick, because I want to let the audience have another question. Is there a bubble in a vertical? Is there a vertical that you deem is really just buzzword?
Fintech is super high.
Again,
it's
right?
a buzzword. I mean, it's a buzzword, but what I've seen in the past years, and in the sector for 10 years, you have to be at the right time with the right people, with the right idea, at the right place.
Yeah, being
and
early is being wrong.
That is the equation for being successful or being successful with a startup. So it doesn't matter if you were like Groupon was there before Groupon was there. So there were people having this idea, but it was the wrong time. And there were markets where companies went into, didn't work totally, but then they went to a different market and all of a sudden it became like a unicorn. So just matching those 4 variables will lead you to the point that you're successful. So, but to answer your question, if there is a hype, it's probably fintech, yes.
Fintech. Alisee, do you agree?
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah. Please.
Hi. So it seems that the bottleneck of growth in emerging markets is infrastructure, not connectivity. So as to markets, you said, so timing is important, market conditions are important, but like infrastructure connectivity is probably the key to open up most opportunities. So how do you see going for emerging markets? Facebook.org and Google Project Loon, that nobody knows what's going on there. And so what do you think is going to happen? So when will it be ready? Because like we heard about like so many billions of people will get online, but like this forecast has always been like overrated. So what is your point of view?
It's a very good question. One very important point you mentioned. Lots of people are getting online. Remember the point when you went online first. You didn't know what to do, you didn't know how to do it, you didn't know how to use Google, you didn't know how to sign up for an email. People skipped the whole evolution using desktop. Everything they're learning right now, they learn on mobile. So they need like a certain amount of time to get to the point where you are as a sophisticated online user, knowing exactly what you find, what you can find where and how to use it. So only if you have people who are online, it's not going to help you. You need to educate the people to use the internet the right way to actually monetize them, which means as well you have to build trustworthiness. You have to build a product from a UI and UX perspective which is suitable and addressing a certain person. You have to identify the right people online. So if you go into a market and you target vastly everyone, your conversion is going to be super low and you're going to be bankrupt in a week. So it's a multi-sided model. The companies have to address the right people and the people have to understand what kind of value a certain service will add. So I think it's an educational thing, which is most important, not only the infrastructure of people having the access to the internet, if that answers your question.
We have time for one last question, so I guess it's going to be you.
How do you see exits of these local companies? It's quite adventurous of the companies when it's missing investors. So Cornerstone is part of a larger family. We own very large businesses all over the world. We go for large businesses, we go for cash flows. Those startups are a long ways away from cash flows, with these meaningful cash flows. What is your experience with large investors, knowledge of otherwise their appetite to go and take currency risk, political risk, and all the other stuff that goes? All the models would be great, but all the other stuff goes with it.
Well, M&A, I think, and really everyone's looking at these markets and will have built the experience, and these companies are here, so it will be mature products to acquire. So it's a question of time. In terms of us, the group, potential IPO is interesting, and so most of the structure is based in Europe, and then you have, so we can talk about that, but then it would be more, of course, on a more mature market in terms of the going public. But M&A, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and more companies are big. The big technology companies, but also the big consumer companies are present and are not able to shift accordingly to the changes of the market and the connectivity of the consumers. And so here it becomes very interesting.
But is there empirical data today of significant M&As that have been done?
No, it's still very small. No, it's still very small.
I think we're getting there. What's happening when you look at corporate venture capital is the first step to actually acquire a company. Before that, they had innovational hubs. They had companies inside of the company which they developed. So they figured it's not working. So what did they do? They built company builders, corporate venture company builders. None of them worked. So what they started to do is corporate venture capital. Invest into companies, see if they gain traction, see if there's a strategic fit to the company. If there is, they do a buyout. So that's what we're seeing lately. We see this in sophisticated market. We see this in the States. We see this in Europe and Israel. Most likely we'll not see it in Latin America, Africa, or Asia. Funny or interesting fact is there's tremendous liquidity in the market, which is really, really scary at the moment. So we see companies in Asia, from business model to a first model, they receive funding on a 20 million valuation. SoftBank is just coming and throwing money at them, and they just don't have an idea how things work. They think if classic Markowitz, if they put money in enough companies, one of them will work and pay back whatever they invested. When it comes to M&A, those companies do have a strategic thing as well. So more and more big companies, if it's corporates, if it's banks or whatsoever, look into companies which are in a closer sphere of whatever they do, any complementary services, anything they can monetize. A very good example was Nuclear. The company was talking about in Mexico, was acquired by a strategic partner who said, I'm going to pay a certain amount, let's call it 10 million, and I will get the 10 million back just because I put all my customers on this service. Telecommunication companies is a very good service. If there's a service which they can offer to 10 million customers and everyone's going to pay €1 in the first month, they can buy a company for 10 million and get their money back in 1 month. So that's how they start approaching M&A, and they're not only necessarily looking at cash flows, they're looking on how can we generate through our own infrastructure the cash flows for the companies which we will acquire. That
prices are nowhere near floor prices.
Absolutely. And you mentioned political risk and currency risk. Those are all things you have to overcome. But look at a company which has huge liquidity. What are they supposed to do with the money? Either they invest it into the core business and grow the business. If it's capped, they're not going to do it, so they're going to go into new verticals, or they're going to start M&A processes. So they're going to look for new companies to add complementary services which add revenues in a short or midterm to their own P&L. And that's what we're seeing lately. Lots of strategic acquisitions and not random acquisitions to build up a portfolio.
I think in this issue, the Western world is after all the others. You know, you see all the big infrastructure activities happening in Africa are done by Chinese companies, by Indian companies, and you know, Europe and the United States are just lagging on. I believe it will change, but a lot of the investments in these areas, and I believe also the acquisitions will be from new emerging technology or equity companies from different areas that we're regular to.
Okay. I'm getting bad looks from the team here in the background, so I think we ran out of time. Let me thank you, Alisee, Mark, and Hanan for your contribution. Thank you.
Grazie mille a tutti. Allora, in realtà ora abbiamo coperto la parte degli investitori, in cui abbiamo visto un secondo come un lato investitore approccia al mercato. Come si guarda a questi mercati dal punto di vista di potenziale, di sia crescita che start, che eventualmente acquisizione di aziende in questo settore. Ora, all'interno della Mobile World Conference pensavo fosse necessario andare a vedere a un certo punto la parte dell'imprenditore. Quindi abbiamo invitato Paolo Tresentos, che ci parlerà in questo momento di come all'interno di questi paesi i giganti del mondo come Google e Apple, quindi con il Google Play Store o con l'Apple Store, non stanno riuscendo a entrare nello stesso modo. Perché? Perché c'è un qualcosa che sta mancando, e questo ce lo spiega Paolo Tresentos.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. I will speak in English. Thank you for the invitation for being here today. There was a great panel before. And are my slides there somewhere? There are some slides there. I just uploaded. Okay, I have a pen there. I talked, yeah, with do you want the pen just, or can you make it? Okay, and I can speak while you try, no problem. So from here, who used Aptoide before? Any of you used Aptoide? Okay, great. And from you, who use Android? Is anyone using Android? Great, great. And app developers, are there app developers around? Yeah, probably you know the difficult part is to get users, right? To get new users, to get installations, that's always the worst part of it. And in fact, what I will talk about with or without slides is about app stores and how can we get users from app stores. And Aptoide is an app store, so an Android app store. And I will just get the pen.
questo punto faccio un'introduzione un secondo su cos'è Aptoid, ragazzi. Per chi ha Android o per chi ha Apple utilizza necessariamente l'Apple Store, giusto? All'interno di Android ci sono due grandi modi per avere un'applicazione. Primo, si utilizza uno store. Secondo, si scarica direttamente l'applicazione, l'APK, sul dispositivo. All'interno di diversi mercati ci sono diversi store che stanno prendendo piede. Quindi in Europa e negli Stati Uniti c'è lo store principale, Google Play Store, che tutti conosciamo. In altri mercati ci sono una trentina di secondary store, si chiamano, di cui 3 in realtà sono i più grandi al mondo, di cui c'è il primo, Latin America e un po' Stati Uniti, che è l'Amazon App Store. Dopodiché c'è Aptoid, che è uno store gigante, che è il secondo più grande al mondo, sparso all'interno del pianeta, e poi ci sono degli altri cinesi, di cui uno non mi ricordo mai il nome, però è puramente focalizzato sul mercato cinese, e così via dicendo. Abbiamo deciso di invitare Paolo in quanto, soprattutto in mercati emergenti, il modo in cui la gente scarica applicazioni non è attraverso il Play Store. Cioè nessuno va sul Play Store a cercare qualcosa. Tutti quanti vanno direttamente o via APK oppure attraverso aziende come Aptoid. È un mercato totalmente diverso rispetto al nostro, per questo focalizzato sul mercato.
Vito, what I would suggest is, as the slides are difficult to come, do you want to do a more like question and answer? So you do some questions, you know about the platform, I would do the answer, it'd be more interactive. Yeah. Maybe, can we get maybe better than I start to talk about app stores and so on. And if we get the slides, that's perfect. Oh, I think we have the slides. Okay, and I have 8 minutes. Thank you. It was fast. So I'll just go, and thank you for Vito's introduction. I bring you 4 points. Mobile is eating the world. There is the mobile-only conference, right? Mobile is all about apps, websites too, but more apps. And Google and Apple will dominate apps distribution? Maybe, maybe not. And what are about Android app stores? So that was Mark Anderson that said software is eating the world, and his colleague, Benedict, even said it's software, but it's in fact mobile. And if you look into the selling of PCs, the black line, and the selling of mobile devices, the orange line, well, you see what is going more higher, right? So mobile devices, the shipping is going crazy. And there is different studies, but if you look for the time that people spending on the mobile device, 89% of the time are using applications, and only 11% of the time are using websites. Of course, websites are in our day's life, but the main applications and the most time we use is for apps. And is it mobile that is eating the world, or is Android that is eating the world? If we look to the last numbers, there are worldwide 81% of Android market share, which is great. And is Google will be the only channel to distribute to the Android market, to the Android ecosystem? In fact, there are so many players. Some of those brands, you know about it. If you are in Russia, Yandex. If you are in China or outside China, Xiaomi. CyanogenMod in Palo Alto or any others. Amazon Fire OS and so on. There are a lot of players using Android as a platform. And there is another thing. There is not one Android. There are 2 different Androids. There is the Android GMS with Google Play services and Android without the Google Play services, what is called Android Open Source Platform, AOSP. So we should be aware as developers or as users that 29% of the Android devices, like smartphones and tablets, does not have Google Play services worldwide. India, China, South America. Every 100 devices sold with Android, 29 does not have Google Play services or Google applications. And there are so many different Android-powered devices, VR Oculus, VR glasses, smartphones, and so on. So we are an open platform. Aptoid is an open platform, which means that our user base, this is our user base. So we started in 2013 with 23 million users, and last year we had 97 million unique users using Aptoid to install apps. So instead of Google Play, they used Aptoid to install apps. And why 97 million users used our platform to install apps? Well, there are different third-party stores. Our line is the yellow. We are doing pretty well compared with others. And because we are an open platform, so we are not ourselves that reach the users, but our partners that reach the users. Anyone could download Aptoid from the web, the internet, or can download one of our partners' app stores. we are an open platform, we have security by design, and we are community-driven. So in the last 5 minutes, I will talk about these 3 points that apply to Aptoide or to other app stores, independent app stores. What is this open platform? Open platform means 3 things. First, open content. I mean, any developer can upload an app, an Android app, to the Aptoide platform. Second thing, you don't need a credit card. So there are a lot of people that don't have credit cards in the globe. But Google Play requires a credit card to register and to upload the apps. That's not with us. And finally, we don't have political restrictions. If it is, yeah, you should take it, yeah. If it's legal, we allow it because we do not do curation of the stores. But open platform also being open source. So our client, our Android native client, is open source, is GPL v2. So anyone can look into our code and inspect the code. This is the GitHub repository. Any of you can go to GitHub and check our code and even fork and have your own app store if you wish. And also privacy. We don't require login for you to download an app. So if you want to download an app, why do you need a login? Of course, if you want to do a comment, we do have to need your email in order to check it, but not for downloads. So all of our databases are in Europe, in the Netherlands, so supposedly out of NSA reach, and we do not cross accounts with other services. We just are focused in App Store. So if you have one account with us, we don't cross it with other services to sell you things. This is our front store. The second thing, we are community-driven. So if you know YouTube, and everybody knows YouTube, you know that there are channels. With App Store, anyone can have their own channel, can have their own store. So let's imagine some stores that I have in my device. So in my Android phone, I have those stores. So this one is a YouTube channel about Android. This one is for fashion. A girl that has a YouTube channel for fashion. And what they do then is the store with their own color, with a banner to their YouTube channel. So it's an influencer with a YouTube channel. And then they choose the applications they use. Like, they even can create categories with the apps that they wish. This is another example. This is from a YouTuber, a Mexican YouTuber, Canal Android. And then he do reviews of the apps he likes. He categorizes saying personalization and so on. So anyone can manage the app store and curate an app store, and then the friends know what kind of applications are you using and what you wish to suggest. The third and last point is about the security by design. So what Google Play says and what Apple App Store says is that every app in the store is secure, is trusted. And we don't think like that. So today, if I know Vito, I trust in him. If I don't know your colleague, I cannot trust because I don't know him. And apps is all the same. For instance, this app, we don't know, and we even expect the kind of ads they have is a kind of intrusive ads. This one, we don't know from anything, but so we put an unknown badge. And that one, Skype or any other, we know the developer interacts with us, and the community had done good reviews about it. It says it's trust, it's not fake, it's not virus, and so on. So if you see, there are different badges depending on what we know about the application. That's like in life, right? So when you go to Aptoide, although all the applications are available, as a user, you start to trust more in that. As a developer, you try to earn the trust of the community in order to have the badge trusted. And this design